Hello everybody. So this is a walkthrough of Study Well session 4 and a bit of a reminder for people who've been to the training on how the session works. The topic for session 4 is looking ahead, and we're helping students prepare for the transition from their first year of their degree to the second year. And most people find it's quite a big jump in terms of expectations and study performance. So what we're trying to do with this session is, rather than having students walk up and look at a cliff face and feel a bit intimidated by it, we're helping them find a pathway up so they get a better view from the top of that cliff. The session doesn't use the Amico card mapping cloth with the other sessions, but we do use the object bag in a slightly different way for our new activity, which is helping people plan their next steps and get advice back from their future self. We've also got some other familiar elements, but not in the same sequence. So, for example, the continuum line that we do comes at the end of the session. So from the beginning, we have our 3 pair questions as a warm-up for the group. So the first question is around looking back to the intention that they set at the previous session, session 3, which, if you remember, was about physical self-care and building new habits, and just a bit of a check-in. How have they got on with their well-being, with looking after themselves? So the second question is looking back at the year they've had, their first year. How's it gone? Is there anything they didn't do differently? And then the third and final question, what changes do you expect moving into next year? After the 3 pair questions, we move straight into the student facilitator storytelling. The focus here is what you remember of moving from first to second year. What did you expect? Was it same or different? How hard did you find it? What were the main challenges? Any advice you give yourself looking back now? But we're wanting to make a connection in this conversation between how we are in ourselves, our well-being, and how we do in our studies. Study well, our recurring theme of if you're doing well, you're going to perform well. If you're performing well, you'll feel better. So as you're doing your memories of moving from first to second year, consider what it is in terms of well-being that helped you. So in the face-to-face training, we look again at all of the Amico cards and just have a quick refresher. So you've got that in your mind as the sort of landscape, if you like, of well-being. For some people, it might be that they need to focus on getting a better night's sleep, or improving nutrition, or getting a network of people they can study with and making those connections. But the various things that we've looked at through the Amico cards, this is the time to start to draw that line of sight back. So as we prepare for change and transition, we can prepare by looking at how we can take care of ourselves even better. And if you can reference that in your stories, that's wonderful. Also, in the last session, we looked at building habits and the different ways of building habits. So having a visual prompt, or doing it at a set time of day, or building it into an existing routine. Recruiting somebody to support you, either by doing something with that person or reporting back. And planning to fail, if we're setting an intention to do something new, we're going to stop at some point and we pick it up and start again until it becomes a habit. So people don't tend to remember things if they're told just once. If you can reference some of that in your storytelling, so it's a reminder or a refresher, that would be really great too. Once the students have shared their memories, their stories, and don't forget that descriptive detail to bring it to life, and using your body to tell the story, get some energy, some expression, so there's some emotional resonance for people when they're listening. Then we move into a small group discussion, and the students are going to talk together about what they feel they need to do to prepare for the transition coming in, and anything that they'd like to change or do differently looking ahead, and how they feel about that change as well, what their expectations are, what their hopes are, any fears they might have. So that's their chance to process. Once the discussions are finished, we're going to move into a slightly more focused look at individuals preparing for change. And to do this, we're going to use the same objects that we've used for the Amico mapping cloth activity. If you don't have enough objects for the people in the room, because they need 3 each for this activity, then just get people to have a look in their bags once you've modelled or demonstrated, and they can use badges and pens or keys. It really doesn't matter. Just 3 things for markers. So you're going to model this activity. One of you will be the one who's doing the planning, and the other one the one who's asking the question and doing the feeding back. So you get a chair, one for each pair, and that chair is the marker for the future you. Take 3 objects. Don't worry too much about the associations. Some people make those naturally, but that isn't the main focus of this activity. And you're going to place them in a line, 1, 2, 3, approaching the chair, maybe this much distance between them. And as you model this, you can explain that. People need to think a little bit at this point. What are my next steps? Because these 3 objects are representing the 3 things you need to do to prepare yourself for change and for transition. Some people do it as a chronological mapping. So first I'm going to do this, then this. For some people, it's just the 3 things that matter. That's fine. They'll work that out. But just take the time to think when you're modelling, what are my 3 steps? And then when you've got that clarity, and the placing of the objects really helps get clarity, actually. The fact you've put 3 things down, it speeds that up in some mysterious brain hack kind of a way. So then the person who's doing the planning tells their partner what the 3 steps are, what these objects represent. So 1, 2, 3. And it's useful then for that to be recapped by the listener. So what I'm hearing is, this is your first step, your second, your third. At that point, sit the person in the chair, which is the chair marking their future self, who's completed those actions. And I quite like to do a bit of a well done handshake. Congratulations, you did it, because that helps that person to really anchor the feeling of, this is possible. I can imagine a future where I've done those things. Sitting in the empty chair really helps with this. It's very surprising for a lot of people how much easier it is to just find those words and articulate that sense of accomplishment when you have it's a bit of a hack, it's a bit of a cheat code, if you like, of being told, this is you, sit here, this is you. And our natural storytelling brain kind of kicks into action at that point. The question is a simple one. What advice would you give back to yourself here and now from this future point of view? Now, we all have a lot more wisdom than we know. And when we're at a point where we're looking ahead at a challenge, it can feel quite big and a bit intimidating or daunting. It's much harder to access that wise self, that voice that has a sense of what's needed. From the point of view of the future self, it's a lot easier. So we're unlocking existing solutions. There's nothing that we don't know. We're just helping ourselves to find that thing and to give a voice to it. So whatever it is they have to say, they say, okay, so you need to remember you've done a lot of preparation and work for this. You're really on top of it. Just keep doing things diligently, or you need to remember to take some time out for yourself. Whatever it is, the advice they're going to give themselves from that future point of view. And then the listener, very similar to the post-it note exercise we did, where we said, what I heard you say was, only this time, rather than just speaking, we're going to take the person out of the chair, the listener sits in the chair, and then they play back the words or the gist. It doesn't have to be the exact words. So that person can hear their advice and take it in, what they've just spoken for themselves. That activity doesn't take too long. You've got 3 objects, 1, 2, 3. You say what they are. You sit in the chair. You have a simple question and answer. What's the advice to yourself? And it usually doesn't take too long. And then a replay of that. And then you swap over and the second person takes their turn. Once you've done the modelling, make sure that you let people know that if they're stuck with any of it, to wave. And if somebody is sitting in that chair and not sure what to say, then just use a few questions of okay, so tell me what the 3 steps were. Why are they helpful? What might it be like once you've done them? And then from there, what's the advice back to self? But my experience is most people don't find it too difficult to do and don't usually need that help. Once you've completed that activity, we get people, if you have time, you can get the pairs to make 4s and ask them to debrief a bit on the activity, how they found it, anything they want to take away from it. If you don't have time, move straight into our next activity, which is a group one, and this is where we do the continuum line. Now this is a developmental line because it's at the end of the session, so we're still focusing on change and next steps. This time we're asking people how prepared they now feel for this future of the second year. So at one end of the line, I'm very prepared, I've thought about it a lot, or I'm feeling very confident. At the other end, haven't really started, don't really know where I'm going. Do make the point that there's no right or wrong because there's plenty of time for people to prepare. It's really just noticing how you are so that you can do something about it in good time if you need more prep. So they find a place on the line. It's one other person and why are you where you are? And then we're going to pause the whole group and just ask them a second question. So if you were going to take 1 or 2 steps further up the line to being a little bit more prepared, what would you need to do? Now, when we're looking at behaviour change, we always look at small incremental build. So one small thing rather than a great big change all at once. And this is here the same, that we're not asking people to walk all the way to the other end of the line. It's just 1 or 2 steps. So what's your next things you can do to help you prepare? And then critically, get people to take those steps physically to walk a little bit, because it's the same as sitting in the empty chair or placing the objects. Making it physical, anchoring it, makes it feel a bit more real. It's a bigger sense of commitment to yourself that you're going to take this away and do something with it. So people are shuffling up the line a little bit, and then we're going to have a pause point to just help people or give them a chance to reflect on how Study Well has been. Because as for you with the training, this is your last session, we're kind of completing a cycle. Same for them, that they've been on a journey together and this is now finishing. So we want to respect that journey as a whole. And just ask people, you can remind them, session 1, we were looking at connection, people arriving, starting to meet new people, settling in. Session 2 was about how you use academic feedback to best effect, but also how you stay organised and focused and on top of things. Session 3, we were looking at the self-care, physical self-care and building good habits at a point where it's winter, it's a bit hard work and there's exams and stress. And then this final session, we've been preparing for change and looking at how we can kind of move forward. So give them a very quick recap and ask them in 4s just to think about what they remember of those sessions, anything that stands out or anything that was helpful, anything they'd like to sort of take forward. If you have time, you can hear from the groups. If not, it can just be a few minutes of them discussing together. You can flag up then that if anyone's interested in supporting next year's first years with Study Well, having done it for themselves, there's a chance for them to put their name down and an email address so that we know that people are interested in coming to be trained and helping run sessions, who those people are. It may not be in the school they're in, but it might be for a different school, but it would be very helpful to have that sense of people who've left with a bit of energy and enthusiasm and want to give it a go. And then we complete with a sharing circle. So as ever, get a pen or another object, and whoever's holding the pen speaks, other people just listen. You kind of keep your eye contact away from that person, so they're talking to the whole group rather than it going through you as a conduit. The pen goes around the circle. If somebody doesn't want to speak, they just pass it on. And it's something I want to remember or to take away, either from this session or Study Well as a whole. And that's where session 4 completes. So I wanted to say thank you to all of you for everything you've done for Study Well. You've been an amazing group this year. I've so enjoyed my time in the room with you all, and I've loved just watching you step into that role of facilitator and take it and make it your own. How your skills have grown, your confidence has grown, the energy that people are bringing in, and the generosity really of showing up with your own experiences and being prepared to support others by sharing those with yourselves, with each other and with the students. So thank you again, and I hope you have a brilliant session 4 and that you can take away from this training process some of those skills and that sense of yourself in that role that you can use in other situations and other settings.